A very good evening to you and welcome to Rwanda Television News with me, Sam Kalisa. Businessmen and women in Rwanda's tourism sector have commended the country's Economic Recovery Fund for helping them to ease the burden of bank loans that businesses have been struggling with. 35% of those loans have seen the interest rates reduced to as low as 5%. Serge Nhore kickstarts tonight's bulletin with this report.
A recent report from the Rwanda Development Board has detailed the devastating effect the consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic have had on the country's economy, because it shrunk by as much as 3.4% last year after growing by 9.5% in 2019. RDB also says that investment fell from $2.46 billion to $1.3 billion during the same period. Of all of the country's sectors, none was worse hit than the service sector, where tourism is found, because it fell by 76% from $498 million to just $121 million. To give perspective of just how devastating that was, the service sector accounted for 7.2% of Rwanda's GDP in 2016, then 8.2% in 2019, then minus 6% in 2020. That year, the Economic Recovery Fund was created with 100 billion Rwandan francs initially injected into it, and half of it going to commercial banks so that they may facilitate the country's hotels, which has helped, though challenges still exist for the hospitality sector. 35% of the bank loans we are paying have had their interest rates reduced to 5%, which we appreciate as good support that we received, but we still have to pay 65% of our loans at their regular interest rates, which range from 15 to 20%. Investment from the private sector increased last year, up from $15 billion in 2019 to hit $16.4 billion in 2020, despite the problems caused by COVID-19, while government investments fell to $9.5 billion from $10.4 billion during the same period. Only 24,703 jobs were created, just 31% of what had been expected, though the construction and industrial sectors continue to provide 68% of those jobs, and the objective is to provide 200,000 new jobs every year. The coming Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in June, here in Kigali, is being seen by the hospitality sector as a breath of fresh air. Almost all of the hotels able to receive delegates of that magnitude will be full. When we look at the statistics, we can see that all of the days the meeting will be taking place are booked. Even though we have now gone almost a year without receiving such delegates, we are happy that we are now going to have a full hotel again. The rooms, the restaurants and conference halls. We expect money from all those facilities, and our employees too will feel like they are really working again. Last year, 42 billion Rwandan francs from the Recovery Fund was given to 139 hotels just to keep them running, and much more needs to be done for the economy as a whole to recover. In the 5 years before the pandemic hit, Rwanda's economy had been growing by an average of 5.2% annually.
Moving ahead, consumers are advised to change their behavior in regards to how they use their income in order to cope up with the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, including rising food price, commodities, and other basic needs. Innocent Mugabo has this report.
Some buyers say that since the emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic in Rwanda in March last year, prices of food commodities such as cooking oil, beans, rice and flour have risen steadily until now. The price of cooking oil increased. We now buy the liter on for 100 francs, but now they give you very little oil. In the past, 1 kilogram of tomatoes costed between 400 to 500 francs, and now it stands at 1,000 francs. Cooking oil is even more expensive. 1 liter now costs 2,000 francs, yet we used to buy it at 700 or 800 francs, and 1,400 when it is worse. Compared to the time before COVID-19, commodities are now very expensive. For example, we used to buy soap at 300 francs, but now it's 600 or 700 francs. Prices increased. 1 kilo of rice used to cost 700 or 800, but now it costs 1,100 francs. 1 kilo of meat used to cost 2,500, but now it costs 3,200 francs. In some markets in Kigali city, such as Kimirongo market, beans cost between 900 francs and 1,200 francs, depending on the type of beans, while cooking oil costs between 1,800 and 2,000 francs per litre. Customers say the rise in prices is not in line with customer purchasing capacity, which has been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. However, the government has been helping traders to cope up with the impact of COVID-19 on trade, including helping investors and facilitating the movement of food products during the lockdown. However, Isaac Nhusizirimwawagabo, a financial advisor, finds that people need to change their behavior in terms of spending money in their daily lives.
So having a budget is very, very important to know what you're doing with your money. If we talk to any organization, you talk to government, you talk to a company, you'll find somebody in that company called the director of finance or head of accounting or something like this, who's in charge. That person knows all the money movement in that organization. Do you know, I would say number 3, some money every month, 5%, 10%, something, anything, percentage of what you make, some of it needs to be in an emergency fund so that when you find yourself in difficult times, you can go to that emergency fund to help you. In times where life is getting more expensive and our money is not increasing, we need to start thinking about how we can be more controlled with our spending and be a little bit on a financial diet.
The executive secretary of ADECOL, a customers' rights protection organization, Ndize Damian, says that the organization continues to advocate for the issue of rising prices. Had it been the fact that farmers did not bring enough produce to the market during the COVID-19, price increase would have been reasonable. But sometimes they increase prices when products are not even scarce on the market. We are going to make a survey in order to know commodity prices that increased and others that did not. Figures from the National Institute of Statistics of Rwanda indicating where prices stood as of March this year. Prices rose by 2% in urban areas in March 2021 compared to the same period in 2020, while in March 2021 prices in rural areas increased by 1.5% compared to March 3, 2020. In urban and rural areas, in March 2021 prices increased by 1.7% compared to March 2020.
Thank you very much, Innocent Mugabo, for that report. Now, regarding the World Press Freedom Day, as Rwanda joined the rest of the globe in marking the World Press Freedom Day, journalists in the country have been commending the progress the media sector has been making when it comes to its freedom.
Rwanda's media sector has grown exponentially over the years, something that is seen as an indication of its freedoms also increasing. 15 years ago, we had 5 private radio stations, if that, and now we have more than 25. In less than 10 years, more than 15 television stations have popped up. Obviously, the sector has grown because of the good leadership we have, and as for the question about YouTube, for that platform to have so many locally produced channels, it is because the government has worked very hard to ensure that the internet is accessible in many areas of the country and that people are able to use that technology. Journalists too agree that progress is being made, though challenges still exist. Some newspapers were being printed abroad before we had our own printing presses and were sometimes not allowed to be distributed. That's an example I'm giving. Now, however, you will not hear of a local media house not being allowed to sell its papers. I once worked for Radio Rwanda, which is government-owned, and I now work in the private sector. We are never told which stories to run or leave out. That sort of freedom should be acknowledged, and anyone who objects to us running a story cannot simply stop us when we are the ones that establish the paper.
hari umuntu ushobora guhaguruka akavuga ati iyi nkuru sinyishimiye yikureho uramubaza uti ndayikuriraho iki kinyamakuru ko ari njye wagifunguye.
Abanyamakuru ni abanyagihugu nk'abandi, ibyo dukunda kwivuga twebwe muri Pax Press.
Journalists are citizens just like anybody else, and we like to emphasize that a lot at Pax Press during trainings. Therefore, if an individual is arrested because they are a journalist, and just because they did their job, which I believe we have no such incidents presently, then it is a problem. However, if that individual is arrested and taken to court for personal reasons as a citizen, I do not believe that is a problem. However, one must ask why organizations like Reporters Without Borders keep ranking Rwanda so poorly when it comes to press freedom.
Raporo ya Reporters Sans Frontières wavugaga njyewe njya nirinda kugira icyo nyivugaho kuko
I do not like talking about that Reporters Without Borders report you mentioned because it is difficult for me to even consider it as a report. I do not even know what to call it. People say they carried out research and provide the basis of that report, saying it covers the year 2020, being released in 2021. And then when it comes to Rwanda, they speak of things dating back to 1996. They name 8 journalists that were killed and imprisoned going back to 1996. The best performing journalists in the country were presented with awards as Rwanda marked World Press Freedom Day on Monday, and the media sector was commended for playing its role in national development.
Inkuru zihembwa uyu munsi ni inkuru iyo urebye ireme ryazo n'uburyo zakozwe.
When you look at the award-winning reports, you can see that they were well-prepared and stand on good principles. They give us the opportunity to use them when gauging and providing quality service delivery, providing advocacy when it comes to the sorts of services being provided and the institutions that were focused on in the stories. Their level of knowledge is commendable and can be used as catalysts for change in the institutions they report on. The 2021 Development Journalists Award also recognized Radio Rwanda and Rwanda Television as the most popular broadcasting stations in the country.
Thank you very much, Serge, for that report. Now, moving ahead, 25 generals from various military groups in South Sudan and in Rwanda, where they will be trained for 5 days on the role of armed forces in promoting unity, reconciliation, and rebuild the country after war. Some of the participants say that Rwanda's experience in this regard would be the example for doing so in their own country, which has also been greatly affected by such issues. Jedumwali reports.
This training is being held at the Rwanda Peace Academy in Musanze district. It deals with top management in post-war and conflict-ridden countries in terms of peace building and reconstruction in general based on how to compare elsewhere. Colonel Jill Rutarimara returns to emphasize what unites the generals.
As soldiers, they should sit and discuss their problems because they were once united and splintered into different groups. If you noticed, even their uniforms are now different. Just as the Honorable Minister told them, they should sit down together, because even now they still sit down in separate groups. But that cannot continue. On a positive note, they're willing to talk about their issues and learn from Rwanda, and we believe that it will be beneficial for them.
Rwanda's Minister of Defense and his South Sudanese counterpart inaugurated the training. Rwanda's Minister of Defense noted that the role of the military and the police in rebuilding the country in the aftermath of the war and unrest is very important, especially drawing from the actions of Rwandans after ending the genocide against the Tutsi and liberating the country.
The military and police in any country cannot claim to have magic answers to all the problems facing their countries. However, they can play a significant role in national reconstruction as well as state and nation building. The Rwanda Defense Force, RDF, has played an enormous role in the construction and transformation of Rwanda. To achieve this, the Rwanda Patriotic Army, which was the armed wing of the Rwanda Patriotic Front, RPF, had First, to be into the army, a cross-section of Rwandans from all parts of the country.
The Minister of Defense emphasized that in order to achieve all this, it requires going back to the history of the people and taking a step forward in rebuilding their country with a greater focus on what unites them rather than what divides them. South Sudan's Minister of Defense and Veterans Affairs says the changes that Rwanda has made since 1994 are a good example, and that is why they are in Rwanda on the study tour.
They can also experience the live example of what has taken place here. They have visited the Kigali Memorial yesterday, the day before yesterday as they arrived, and that is a very important experience for us to learn what needs to be done by the organized forces to contribute to national reconciliation and healing.
The entire South Sudanese delegation has noted that there is much it can learn during the visit. The training has been organized by the Rwanda Peace Academy in collaboration with the United Nations Institute for Training and Research. Mngari Jade, RTV News.
Analysts on international community matters are concerned that there is no lesson learned from the genocide against the Tutsi, since they find no practical steps in place to prevent other extreme killings that might happen around the world, especially on the African continent. On the other hand, Africans are being urged to promote unity instead of carrying on with arguing with the international community on who is the cause of their own problems.
It was after the Jewish Holocaust that the United Nations decided that there would be no more genocide around the world. However, less than 50 years after that, with the whole world still saying never again, the same tragedy, the genocide against the Tutsi, befell Rwanda, a tragedy that was being visibly prepared, despite that nothing was ever done to stop it. Since then until now, the international community lost credibility because the genocide against the Tutsi emphasized that the saying never again was never practical, according to Alice Wairumunderitu, Special Advisor on the Prevention of Genocide to the United Nations Secretary General.
I was in a session where I was told, for how long will you say never again? You keep saying never again, but atrocities are happening around the world. And for the answer for me for that is that the best way to honor the victims and survivors of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi and other genocides that have happened in other places, including in Srebrenica, is to guarantee that no one else endures this most heinous crime. And therefore, we must keep saying never again and keep commemorating and keep speaking at commemorations and keep holding perpetrators accountable, because the ongoing crises around the world remind us that we must work harder to prevent atrocity crimes, whatever our roles and capacities.
General Henry Nkwame Anyidoho is a Ghanaian whom during the genocide against the Tutsi was a deputy to General Romeo Dallaire, who commanded the UN peacekeeping force that was deployed in Rwanda during the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, UNAMIL. In an interview during the Rwandan mission to the UN's 27th commemoration of the genocide against the Tutsi, General Anyidoho said history can be repeated at any time, especially in Africa.
Based on my experience in Rwanda and in Darfur, and what I've seen happening around me all over the world, I'm not at all optimistic that genocide will be prevented if the world's leading powers remain interested only in the areas of their strategic interest. And organizations, regional organizations such as the AU, as a regional body, cannot take decisive action to back its own strategic resolutions. We may unfortunately have to see the same things happening again, and that, I hope, can be prevented. It is not good saying never again after it has all happened. The world should be sincere in whatever we do. In Africa's situation, we have never lacked early warning. Sometimes we had the warnings 10 years ahead of time.
Although the role of the international community in the genocide against the Tutsi and other tragic massacres around the world is beyond any reasonable doubt, President Paul Kagame finds it important for Rwandans and Africans in general to not give any chance to anyone who wants to discriminate them, since that is the root cause of most of the problems the continent faces. He made the remarks last weekend at the RPF Inkotanyi Extended National Executive Committee meeting.
It was such a madness that even a single family would be divided along the line of where the husband comes from and where the wife comes from. Can you imagine such a madness? Did it happen or not? It happened. How can such madness happen? And how can we call it an external factor that caused it? An external factor, the way it works, or these actors from outside, is to come and say, oh, you are this, you know. So you first have to accept it. So you are different. And the meaning of that difference is that you must turn on each other. And you go ahead and do it. So can it be a problem of this external person who comes and convinces you are this, and convinces the other one that is this, and then convinces you to say you turn on each other? Of course, this is bad enough for an external person to come and do this. But it is worse for these two people to accept to turn on each other.
Based on the fact that the genocide against the Tutsi was stopped by Rwandans themselves without the role of the international community, analysts believe that it is a sign that strengthens the potential and ability of Africans and thus can achieve anything when united.
Moving ahead, some of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi survivors in Rwanda districts whose property was destroyed but decided not to ask for compensation assure that this has played a role in reconciling them with the perpetrators. However, the perpetrators' children are still facing challenges, as Gabi Muvunyi reports.
This 27-year-old Semurjango Didion from Rubavu district is the son of Bakie Jean, the former burgomaster of the former Mutura commune, who was convicted by the Gacaca courts for his role in killing Tutsi during the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi and looting of property. This young man was raised in Imbabazi orphanage in Mudende sector. In 2012, he was reunited with his family and expressed that he faced problems of not knowing the whereabouts of his father's assets in order to sell them and pay back what was destroyed by his father back in 1994.
There are times when people approach me and tell me all these things will come back to me, but it really depends on different people. There are some people whose hearts are still back in the past.
After undergoing peace and unity training at Inyenyeri, an association that promotes unity and reconciliation, he says it helped him understand the reason as to why he needed to pay back the damaged property and to live alongside his family members that were betrayed by his father.
I understand all these things need to be paid back. Some people approach me and narrate how my father destroyed their property, and we are able to decently hold a conversation and we forgive each other.
Semirjango says that after he realized how large the sum of assets he needed to pay back and was left with nothing, he decided to appeal to the president of the country to request for housing.
That time when the president came and I expressed my issue, that I had an issue with some land, I asked some help and I was able to get a house.
Some of the survivors of the genocide against the Tutsi did not take well the news of Semirjango receiving help. However, some say with the help of Inyenyeri and talking to psychologists, they can put that spite behind and forgive one another.
We've said that this land should be taken away because we have received nothing from him and how he is being built for a house.
founder of Inyenyeri Mudende Boniface, who is known for uniting families of the genocide against the Tutsi survivors and the perpetrators as well, points out that adults are the ones who prevent youth from promoting unity and reconciliation. He urges them to stop sowing hatred among young people. Semurjango's mother and father died in exile. He says he's proud of Rwanda's progress in unity and reconciliation and how far the country has come in terms of rebuilding. Gabi Muvunyi for RTV.